In this video, I'm going to go over the psychology of Mike Tyson and his legendary trainer, Cus D'Amato. I'm going to play some clips of Mike Tyson, and I'm going to basically kind of psychoanalyze him as we go through these clips. I'm not making any diagnosis or anything. I'm not qualified for that. However, I think Mike is an interesting person beyond just a fighter. I believe that he's got lots of wisdom that we can learn from. And I think that he's just a good kind of case study that we can use to kind of understand some of these ideas that I've been talking about on my channel as well. If you're new to my channel, I talk a lot about Jungian psychology. So I'm going to use some of that terminology because it's really helpful in breaking down the psychology, especially in this example with Mike Tyson. So the first thing we want to get into is that Cus D'Amato really built Mike Tyson to who he is today, but not just as a fighter, but he built him psychologically. And we're going to play some of these clips now. So let's just play this first one here. Unfortunately, guys, this clip got copyright claimed through YouTube. However, stick around because I've got 9 other clips of Mike Tyson and none of them got copyright claimed. So just stick around for that. If you want to look up this particular clip, just go to YouTube, type in Mike Tyson, I am a god, and it will come up. It's a famous clip of Mike Tyson. He basically talks about how he has fear entering the ring. And, he's fearing his opponent, but he's getting more confidence. And then finally, when he enters the ring, he feels like a god. He feels unstoppable, unbeatable. That's the point. Remember that. He feels like a god. All right, let's continue the video. So you can see there in that clip that Mike Tyson, he's talking about the fear, right? The fear. I fear him. I fear losing to him, and he's full of fear. But as he's approaching the ring, he's getting more confidence. And then when he finally gets into the ring, he's a god, right? And I find that very interesting, especially if you understand Jungian psychology, because that idea of identifying with God, he's kind of identifying with that. And if you think I'm just bullshitting, you'll see in future clips that I play that basically the kind of underlying psychology of this is to take on that kind of godlike persona in order to defeat his enemies. But just a tidbit there, I've been reading the book Iron Ambition by Mike Tyson himself. So he wrote the book, well, he obviously had help writing it as well by the co-author. However, it's a great book. It basically is around Mike Tyson talking about his relationship with Cus D'Amato. And in it, I'll just read some of this here. It says, Cus was always acknowledged as being one of the first trainers to concentrate on the psychology of his boxers. At various times during his career, he said that boxing was 50, 60, and once even 85% mental. So early in his career, he began developing psychological theories of behavior that could be applied to boxing. One of the first places he looked was the work of Sigmund Freud. And then it kind of goes into a quote from Cus D'Amato himself. And he basically says he only read Freud a little bit and he didn't really take that much away from it that he already didn't know. And then later on, he says, he didn't tell him much more than he already knew, but he liked to take practical kind of things away from these books so he could apply them to his fighters. And then later in the book, it talks about how Mike Tyson talks about how Cus would train him to use his fear, the dynamics of controlling fear. And it says here in the book, controlling fear and making it work for you was the cornerstone of Cus's philosophy of life. Okay, so that's very interesting. So you've seen that clip I just played, and it's about controlling that fear and making it work for you. It's like a transmutation of fear. And he also made Mike Tyson read all these different books, specifically one by Peter Heller called In This Corner, right? And Mike says it was a great book because it was interviews with all-time great fighters. Cus thought that this was essential reading because all these immortals were admitting their fears in the book. So it was about admitting that, look, I have fear, and that's okay. And look, let me play this clip. Oh no, I didn't cut that clip out of Cus D'Amato talking about fear, but I'll play this clip of Cus talking about stripping back the layers of Mike Tyson. So he's really getting into the deep psychology of Mike.
When I peeled these layers away on Mike Tyson, I found what I thought I'd find. A person of basically good character. A person who is capable of doing the things that are necessary to be done in order to be a great fighter or a champion of the world. When I recognized this, then my next job was to make him become aware of this thing, of these qualities, as well as I. Because unless he knew them as well as I did, it wouldn't help him very much. So I had to make him aware of it, and how I did that was by constantly bringing to his attention the different things when the time, as they developed, different things I bring to his attention, little incidents or whatever, which would tend to reveal himself, so to speak, to himself. And only by letting him know that he had these qualities and he had these abilities and potentials would enable him to get the real solid, deep down inner belief in himself. Because for a person to believe something with which that he could never back up, well, it's not stable enough. We have to give him a reason to believe in himself in order to believe in himself. And in the process of giving him the reasons for him to believe in himself, he does, in fact, after a period of time, recognize these qualities do exist, and therefore he has reason to believe in himself. And the act of doing the technical part of it is relatively simple. As he brought out so well himself, the ability to apply the discipline, the ability to do what needs to be done, in my opinion, is the definition of a true professional. And not because a man holds a professional license. A man who's able to do what needs to be done, no matter how he feels within, is a professional. He does what needs to be done. And I think that Mike is rapidly approaching that status, that important point, which I consider he must do in order to be the greatest fighter in the world. And for all we know, barring unforeseen incidents, and if this continues without any interruption, I'm going to say something that most people think, well, he's a biased person. It's entirely possible that if we get the sparring and everything else that goes with it, whatever he requires, he may go down in history as one of the greatest we ever had, if not the greatest that ever lived in his division.
And you can see there, Cus is basically building up Mike with an identity. He's saying, I've uncovered your identity, Mike, and you are the world champion. Do you believe that as well? Can you see that as well? And he's really getting in there. And in the book, it really gets into how he followed certain psychological tactics from different things. He pulled out pieces from different things. A little bit from the military. You know, in the military, they kind of break down your identity and then they build you back up so that you're not, like I said before, so that you can kind of use that fear for you and not against you. And also just other techniques and other things that Cus D'Amato would take from psychology, and as we get into later, various kind of spiritual, mystical kind of beliefs. And even in that clip there, you could see that he was trying to kind of confirm or speak out the positive affirmation of Mike becoming a champion in the future. Because he believes it, he can see it, and if Mike can believe it and see it as well, he can become it. And underlying that kind of those words and those ideas is kind of this belief in these other mystical things. And you know, I'll show you a clip later of Mike Tyson talking about that, so you know I'm not just making that up. And in the book, Mike clearly talks about that basically that Cus D'Amato really was into the power of the mind. It's this school of thought that was called New Thought. It was basically kind of like a religious movement in a sense, but it wasn't really under one denomination. It was kind of lots of different people. It had like influences of Hinduism, Christianity, all sorts of different influences. And then it's kind of popularized in the idea of, you know, think and grow rich, stuff like that. But really, Cus was into this type of stuff. And he believed heavily in the power of the mind, in visualization, in affirmations and speaking those affirmations out. And he'll have Mike Tyson speak those affirmations out as well. So this is all part and parcel of the psychology behind Cus D'Amato and behind Mike Tyson. It's this intensity And it obviously worked as far as it was effective in the ring. And that's why Cus D'Amato talks about being a professional, right? Those who are a professional, they're not just someone who has a license to be a professional boxer. They're someone who actually gets the job done. He's speaking those kind of new thought language of you do what you set out to do, and it doesn't matter. You just do the impossible, basically. It doesn't matter who's in front of you. You destroy them. And so let's go to the next video here of Mike when he is asked about his trainer.
Yes, met me. I'm a little kid. He said, you're going to be the world champ.
Here we go.
It's interesting, Mike. You get emotional when you talk about Cus. But you've said Cus didn't like it when you showed emotion.
Oh, yeah? Like,
Why didn't he want you to show emotion? Did he equate it with weakness?
I don't know what he did.
You okay?
Yeah, how could I ever do an interview about him when I start crying? How this guy know? How did he know I was the one?
Well, you were a specimen.
Takes more than that to be a fighter. Yeah, it's talking about my character and my discipline, and I didn't know what discipline was, so he explained to that. Discipline is doing what you hate to do, but do it like you love it.
Mike, did you love him or you were afraid of him?
Both.
Really?
Yeah, both.
How did you reconcile that, loving him and being afraid of him?
How do you reconcile that? You're his slave. If he told me to kill you, I would kill you.
Really?
Yeah. Listen. I'm a young black kid from the hood.
Right.
If you said something disrespectful about my fighting, Cus would beat you. Stop punching you.
Right. Okay.
So, I said I dedicate my life to him for that. I wish I could say he was just this white man I played. I wish I could say that.
Right.
But that's not how it goes.
Mm-hmm. You miss him to this day? Do you think, Mike, that if he had lived, that your life would have been different?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
No doubt.
So you can see there with those clips there that every time an interviewer brought up Cus D'Amato, Mike would start to get emotional. Now, in Jungian psychology, basically that's hitting on what's called a feeling tone or a complex. So there's basically a complex which is in the unconscious, which is a part or aspect of your personality, right? And this is really what I want to hone in on in this video as I show you more clips of Mike Tyson, that there's a complex that's surrounding Mike when he fights, you know, and so it comes out if he's talking about fighting, especially if it's around Cus D'Amato. So Cus D'Amato really brings that out. So you can tell Cus D'Amato built his ego. And what is an ego in Jungian psychology? An ego is the kind of dearest and nearest complex that we have. We are built up of many different complexes or many different personalities. We are all built up of different aspects of who we are. And this particular aspect is triggered. And the reason why you know it's triggered is because Mike becomes emotional every time we talk about Cus D'Amato. It's not like it's just because Cus D'Amato was dead or something like that. You know, lots of people can talk about the past of bad experiences and not begin to cry. Mike begins to cry and visibly gets shaken up when Cus D'Amato is talked about. And that is an indication of an underlying, that is an indication that we're triggering a complex. And what I want to show you is that in Jungian psychology, there's the complex, and underneath the complex, in what Jung calls the collective unconscious, are the archetypes. And this archetype are kind of like the gods, you know what I mean? And so this is interesting about how his psychology is set up. Remember when he entered the ring, he felt like a god. Cus D'Amato peels back the layers and is able to get deep in there. And in future clips, he talks about how Cus was the only person who could really help Mike get deep into that space. And so let's continue here. So I'm going to play this clip. This is when Mike Tyson was on Joe Rogan. This is before he decided to come back and fight at the age of 54. So just look here.
What is it like for you to watch boxing these days?
It's just not my life anymore.
You don't watch it at all? Like, did you watch Tyson Fury,
No, I
Deontay
didn't
Wilder?
watch it. I didn't watch it.
Oh, it was a great fight.
I was in the air flying when they were fighting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You didn't watch any of the highlights or
No,
anything?
I saw some of the highlights, yes.
How crazy is Deontay Wilder's power?
Good stuff.
Crazy, right? Because he's built so strange. It's
How
209 pounds.
incredible is Tyson's jaw.
Incredible. And gets up and wins the rest of the round. That's what's really incredible. It's amazing
Good
fight.
stuff.
Yeah. So you don't follow any of it
No, 'cause I
today?
always, that's part of my life.
Right.
I got mixed feelings with that part of my life.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's a lot of stuff that I don't like about myself and stuff. I try to forget that stuff because I'm on a whole different pattern. Yeah.
So even watching other people box.
I don't even watch nothing. I try to stay away as much as possible.
So watching other people box makes you think about yourself when you were fighting. It reminds you of it.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I always say these guys are so much nicer than I was. You know what I mean? These are cool guys, man.
So there you have it. So that was before Mike decided to kind of come back and reinvigorate his ego, which we'll get into. But basically, you can see there he's more passive, he's avoidant, he's really calm, but he's kind of avoiding that part of his life. He doesn't want to reactivate that. And in the book, actually, Tyson talks about how Cus would help him detach from his emotions. They would do that type of, I don't know, it's like that type of out-of-body experience that people, like I said, Cus was into these kind of new thought ideas, and he helped kind of Mike Tyson go through these meditative type of processes where you kind of have an out-of-body experience, and that would help you detach from your emotions so that, in the heat of battle, your emotions wouldn't get the best of you. So this is really deep stuff, to be honest. And so let's amp this up a little bit. So that's him pre-coming back, and this is also him pre-coming back. But listen to this.
And I'm an exponent of the art of fighting. You were throwing punches. I learned from the master, my master, Cus D'Amato, my mentor. He was throwing punches. He was throwing combinations. And the art of punches is when you could throw two punches that sound like one. He was throwing punches. You can hear them. They were two, but they sound like fucking one punch. They don't understand. Anybody that hears this understand the art of fighting. They know what I'm saying. He threw two punches that sound like one. You know how magnificent your speed has to be for that? That you don't even know that about fighting, do you? That didn't even come to your mind to make two punches sound like one. The ultimate knockout puncher.
The ultimate knockout punch. Don't get hit by that. Don't get hit by that.
Listen, I'm a fucking student of war. I know all the warriors from Charlemagne, Achilles, the #1 warrior of all warriors. From then Alexander, Napoleon, I know them all. I read them all, I studied them all. I know the art of fight, I know the art of war. That's all I ever studied. That's why I'm so feared. That's why they feared me when I was in the ring, because I was an annihilator. That's all I was born for. And now those days are gone. It's empty. I'm nothing. I'm working on being the art of humbleness. Can you believe in me? That's the reason why I'm crying, because I'm not that person no more. And I miss him. Because sometimes I feel like a bitch. Because I don't want that person to come out, because if he comes out, hell is coming with him. And it's not funny at all. It must sound cool, like I'm a tough guy. It's just, I hate that guy. I'm scared of him.
So there you have it. We could see there Mike is visibly amped up again, talking about Cus D'Amato. So again, when he talks about Cus D'Amato, that complex is then triggered again. And listen here. So that is linked to that idea of he studied war, he studied the art of fighting, you know, and that's basically what he did when he was with Cus. Cus would give him all the stuff to study, and Cus would say that he was very interested in studying it. So Mike had a great interest in these things, and he studied history even. And this puts into context some of the other famous clips by Mike, which we'll watch now. Check this out.
Always confusion with Mike Tyson, who's standing by with Jim Gray. Jim?
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Steve. Mike, was that your shortest fight ever?
I bear witness there's only one God, and Muhammad, blessings and peace be upon him, is his prophet. I dedicate this fight to my brother, Darabam, who died. I'll be there to see you. I love you with all my heart. All praise be to my children. I love you. Oh God, man, what?
Is this your shortest fight ever? In any time, amateur, professional, ever?
Assalamu alaikum, Maida. I don't know, man. Yeah, Lennox Lewis. Lennox, I'm coming for you.
Mike, is it frustrating to train like you did and then have this in 7 or 8 seconds?
For this fight, I only trained probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks for this fight. I had to bury my best friend, and I dedicated this fight. I wasn't going to fight. I dedicated this fight to him. I was going to rip his heart out. I'm the best ever. I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lennox is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody as ruthless. I'm Sonny Liston. I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable. And I'm just ferocious. I want your heart. I want to eat his children. Praise be to Allah.
Are you saying now, Mike,
So it's kind of, this was very controversial. Lots of people said, oh, eat your children, you know, and that's all kind of controversial stuff. But when you think about it and remember the complex of him studying all these different conquerors, he's like, Lennox isn't a conqueror. He ain't Alexander. I'm Alexander. Well, who's Alexander? Alexander is Alexander the Great, the conqueror. Right? And so he studied this, and then so when he says, I'll eat your children, right? He's also studied Greek mythology. Kronos was a god or a titan or whatever who ate his own children so they wouldn't dethrone him. You see, so it's all in there. And even when he kind of, in the beginning, was fumbling around, he's like, oh, what God, what? So he's like, so all these kind of things are interlinked, right? But it's about being the dominant fighter, being the dominant god, really. And so he says in another clip somewhere that I haven't cut out, you know, that when you win and you make a victory, you hold up the head of that victory to the next conqueror, and you're like, you're next. So that's kind of what he was doing there. So he was ferocious, but you see that intensity. It's not just words. It's an intensity. It's inbuilt in his emotions. You see, it's a personality that is inbuilt in him. And this is the psychology behind Mike Tyson and why he was so vicious, why he was able to be who he was in the ring, and kind of how it impacted him outside of the ring. And now we get into some of that here. And remember, in that other clip that we played before, when he was talking about him not feeling like he's anything and that he misses being that person, right? And he describes it similarly in this other clip here.
I was never able to understand the concept of greatness. I just never was able to understand that concept of greatness. And as time went on and I've gotten older and I've met many journeys on people that I met on my journey and people who I've read about on my journey. I read that all greatness, the majority of greatness in itself doesn't come with goodness. The two don't coexist with one another. And I spent all my life trying to become great because I had such a low self-esteem. And I realized late in life, well, I'm saying I'm 47, but late in my life, that all great men are not good men. And then so I tried to embark on a whole different career and try to become good. But what's the concept of good? Being a floor mat, I never understood the concept of good. The concept of good is pretty much then I must be a politician, because politicians are always striking for goodness and always trying to win votes from people. And only reason that we win votes because they believe that we're good. So how do we live in those two dimensions at once? You want that greatness for self-gratification, but you want goodness from a human perspective. And I really have no idea, no clue how do I juggle both of them and be in harmony. And then in all actuality, they don't exist. You have to pick a side.
So at first you might not really understand why Mike's talking about that, especially in that interview. I don't think many people understood what he was saying there, but maybe in this video here you'll understand more clearly. In Jungian psychology, this is known as reconciling the opposites. There's normally different opposites in life that you experience, and the person kind of tries to reconcile them in their own personality. Obviously, Mike is trying to reconcile, the difference between what it takes to be that warrior king in the ring, that conqueror, and kind of live that normal life with family and stuff like that. So he's trying to reconcile that in his own life, and he articulated it really, really well. Mike Tyson is very insightful and very wise. And basically, I want to keep going here. So then this is then when he decides to come back to fighting. This is what Joe Rogan has to say.
Right. Here, Mike Tyson explains his desire to fight again. I feel unstoppable now. The gods of war have reawakened me. And he said something about his ego firing up. See if you can find that quote. Because that was one of the things that he actually talked about in the podcast. The gods of war have awakened me. They've reignited my ego and want me to go to war again. Whoa. Holy shit, that's so terrifying. That's so terrifying.
So there you have it. The gods of war have reawakened my ego. Now, you might think, okay, that's just some stupid, language thing, It's like a funny thing to say. But I'm telling you, when you understand Cus D'Amato's influence over Mike Tyson and the complex that Cus D'Amato has built in Mike Tyson's ego, that's what he's referring to. My ego has returned. What Cus D'Amato basically has built is returned. The gods have reawakened me, right? And now I'm ready for war again. So again, going back to that frame of Jungian psychology I was talking about, we all have different complexes, which is a part of our personality. And those complexes link down in the collective unconscious or the deeper parts of our unconscious to archetypes, which are akin to what we think of as gods. And so that's what's happening with Mike here, is that the archetypes of war, so to speak, all the stuff that he's read in the literature of conquerors and kings and gods taking over, eating their children, all that stuff that he's read, all the different fighters, Jack Dempsey, all these things that he's read in his experience, all that is activating this kind of, I guess, invigoration of his personality, reinstating the programming of that complex of his ego to throw him back into wanting to fight again. And it's this other aspect of him that he kind of cut off from, but he felt like something was lacking. So now he's trying to reintegrate that into his life, into his personality again. And now this is now a clip from Mike Tyson when he comes back onto Joe Rogan after he's said that he's coming back to fight.
Guy in the neighborhood that people came through to settle beefs and talk things over with and loan people stuff and help people out. And he liked being in that position of being able to teach people something, what he believed was teaching them something.
He knew so much about the human mind.
Well, when he died, this is very interesting.
So this is talking about Cus D'Amato.
He died, and Camille was that I lived with him and Camille. And we went out and cleaned the room, and when I saw in his room, I saw all books about psychiatry and the mind and everything, and mystic stuff and all that stuff. And I said, this is what he was really about.
Mystic stuff.
Just like he believed he was a mystic believer as well. He believed in Zen and the art of archery and all that. He had those books, and he was just a believer in more than what we saw.
Yeah.
He knew it was more than what we could physically articulate going on with us as human beings, or what we are called.
When you sit back and you think about your career and how fortunate you were to run into that guy, I mean, how much did that play a part in your mind? Like when you knocked out Trevor Berbick, became the youngest ever heavyweight champion, when you're thinking about that, did you ever stop and think like, man, how lucky am I that I ran into that man?
No. He said he summons me.
He summoned you. Whoa. Makes sense. I mean, you think about a man whose life work involved psychiatry, involved the mind, boxing, hypnosis, training all these boxers, Floyd Patterson, had all these great fighters, and then he wants one great one before it's over, and he summoned you.
No, he wants an animal.
An animal. He summoned you. What did that feel like for you? Did it make sense?
No, I believe what he told me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I believe you could summon someone, but goddamn, that seems like it's real.
Yeah.
That seems like it's real.
I don't know. I think you can do whatever you believe you can do, if you really believe it.
Yeah. Well, that was what I got out of all the things that I read about you and him together, and being able to talk to you about you and him, is that he gave you these tools to understand the way your mind worked, and you just ran with them.
I'm an extreme kind of person. Yeah, so I get carried away. If your confidence is not a delusional perspective, you don't have the right confidence.
Yeah. You get so amped up, Mike. Even he's sitting here talking to you about these things. I could see it in you. You get amped up, even just talking about achieving things, talking about success, talking about the mind. You know, I could see it inside of you. You get very fired up about these things.
Yeah. I have to be serious about anything that I want to accomplish.
Yeah, that intensity is what made you special. I mean, that.
So you can see there that Mike Tyson, he's triggered again. You can see he's struggling to speak throughout that interview, and he also obviously reveals the beliefs of Cus D'Amato, that he summoned him. See, so I told you Cus D'Amato believes in new thought stuff. He summoned Mike Tyson. And even Mike then pushes back on Joe Rogan's kind of realism and says, well, I believe you can do whatever you can. And then he kind of balls up and gets really serious. And you can see that there's this seriousness that it's triggered. And he has a very different demeanor on this podcast on Joe Rogan than he did on that other on the earlier podcast of Joe Rogan, where before he decided to come back to fight, before he reinvigorated his ego, before the gods reinvigorated his ego. So I find that very interesting there. So it's a good thing to see how a person's personality can be influenced through these psychological, constructs, I guess, that are activating within you, right? Or these archetypes, right? And see, in the book, I highly recommend you purchase or at least hire somehow, read the book Iron Ambition by Mike Tyson. It is an interesting book. It's kind of funny, But in it, he also talks about the confidence. And did you see in that video, he mentions confidence again? See, it's a complex. So all the similar words come up again. Him being serious, him talking about confidence again. See, it's all the programming that Cus D'Amato, really helped develop in Mike Tyson when he was younger. Because in the book, he talks a lot about confidence, and Cus D'Amato helps him do this method called auto-suggestion through the unconscious mind. Again, this is new thought kind of ideas. And Cus really enjoyed the writing of Emile Coué. And so it says here, Mike says, Cus had unearthed a book called Self-Mastery Through Conscious Auto-Suggestion by a French pharmacist named Emile Coué, that was published in the United States in 1922. So Cus was really into this auto-suggestion type stuff. that you would allow the unconscious mind to receive kind of healing, I guess, to receive these kind of positive affirmations. Now, Emil Cui kind of used those techniques to supposedly heal people, but Cus believed in this, but he used it and applied it to fighting and boxing. And he used it to build Mike Tyson's ego, to build his kind of identity. And he had, as Mike says here, I started in with the affirmation as soon as I moved in with Cus. And he said this: day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. Day by day, in every way. And he would just repeat that like 20 times. Day by day, in every way, I'm getting better and better. And he basically talks about this, inner principle of not having too much will at that point, but just kind of in a relaxed state, allowing those words to seep into your unconscious. You're just kind of repeating it. It's this idea of auto-suggestion. So read up on that if you want to learn more about that. But it's this new thought ideas, and you can see that Mike is still kind of influenced by those things, especially since he's decided to come back and fight. Now, I want to play this clip here of this is in the interview, pre kind of fight between Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson, right?
I don't know what are you talking about? What's not a real fight? You got Mike Tyson and Roy Jones, and I'm coming to fight, and I hope he's coming to fight, and that's all you need to know.
The last guy that did an exhibition with Mike got dropped in the first round. And if you don't know that, then there's something wrong with you. So who goes in the ring with the great legendary Mike Tyson and think, oh, this is an exhibition? 12-ounce gloves, no headgear? Really? This is an exhibition? Come on, bro. Be for real.
My mindset is totally bliss. This is something I've done all my life since I was 13 years old. I'm more evolved now than I've ever been. My objective is to go in there with the best intentions of my life to disable my opponent. And that's just what it is.
My objective is to go in there and disable my opponent. I feel very sorry for Roy Jones Jr. I really hope that this doesn't end too badly. I just hope that they have a good fight and that it's all good. But he's still, you can see in that he's more reserved. So, in other clips, I don't have enough time to really show them, but in other clips, Mike talks about how he is kind of, focusing on being more humble in his later life, and that, he knows that he's not a god, he knows that he's not whatever, but you can still see in there, he's got that activated programming of, he's kind of holding back a bit because he knows he doesn't want to disrespect Roy, he doesn't want to disrespect anyone, but you can still see it deep in there. He really wants to get in there and hurt his opponent. And I think that is extraordinarily interesting. So I do believe that he is more, like he said in that clip, he's more evolved than he was when he was younger. When he was younger, he would identify with being a god almost, and but now it seems he still has that programming, like it still can come back, but he seems to be able to he's not identifying with it as much. So it's a little bit healthier, the way he's integrating his aggression, I guess, into it. So I don't know, time will tell though. We'll see what happens to Mike, but I think he is doing better than he has before, obviously. So there's one last clip. This one's a bit longer, but I think it will be interesting to go through. So here we go. Let's play this last clip.
To go from Brownsville to perhaps what was one of the most important experiences for you, meeting Cus D'Amato, and what that meant. I'd like us to see photo number 2 if we could. You say about him, there wasn't a happy muscle in his face.
No, this is an awesome man. Listen, this guy only talk. He reminds me of Edmond Dante from the Count of Monte Cristo. This guy was always, till the day he died, he's always planning his revenge and his comeback for the people that put him in self-exile from boxing. These guys are dead, and he's still planning revenge on these guys. And he's planning revenge on the guys who worked for this guy, but didn't like the guy anyway either. But he wants to go after them too, just because they worked for him, you know. But they didn't. You know, it was just crazy. They didn't have nothing against Cus, but Cus hated those people just because they knew him in any kind of capacity, and he always planned for his great comeback in boxing.
Channel for me, Cus. Tell me, I mean, you write in the book that among my very favorite passages are those passages where you channel Cus. You tell us what he said to you and the incredible impact he had on you. In some way, he's not only a mentor, but he's also nearly a medium.
I never, in my whole, listen, this is really interesting.
Number 3.
You see, you take notice of that language he's using in. He's not only a mentor, but he's also a medium. It's like this deeper kind of aspect to this whole thing. It's the psychology underneath it all.
What is he saying to you?
He's telling me, what this guy always tells me, he says, I'm allowing my mind to get the better of me. Your mind, you don't have your mind on your work. You're not being disciplined. He really knew that. He always believed that his mind could heal anything. He believed if he had cancer, his mind could heal cancer. He was a strong believer that your body only purpose was to carry your brain. And, you know, he was just amazing, man.
Tell me more. Tell me more, because he had such a huge impact on you. He told you things early on that nobody had told you before, and he believed in you in a way that nobody had paid attention to you before. You went up to his gym, he heard you walking up, he saw in you something quite immediately.
Wow, I can't say that because I might get emotional, and I don't.
So he's getting emotional. It triggered that complex again. Cus.
He taught you some techniques, which I'd like you to demonstrate slightly. The peekaboo. I mean, I was trying to understand what that all meant.
Well, the peekaboo is really.
I don't know if he's showing you that.
It was really a cruel style of boxing. It basically kept both your hands up, and it basically you twist at your waist and you move, and you come forward, make the guy miss, you counter punching, and it was pretty much it's really pretty much he really discovered it from karate. He watched karate people do it, and just move, get to one position and punch with everything you got with bad and mean, ferocious intention. And most of his fighting was mostly psychologically. He believed the physical actuality of boxing was only 10% when the mind was 90%. He always believed in improving yourself and strengthening your mind. And you really couldn't do that just by talk. You had to do it by action and practice.
But one of the things he did with you was talk to you.
Every
day,
hours.
You would take these walks. I mean, you describe them. Every day you would walk and walk and walk and talk, and he would just repeat and repeat.
He would really tell me what I should be doing. I should be always think about improving myself. And have me say day by day, and everywhere I would get better and better. And
there we have it.
It's
really, auto-suggestion.
I never had, this is really interesting. When I met Cus, even though I was a street kid and I would come with like a tough kid, I never had an ego. I was never really jealous of anybody. I never really thought much of myself. But when I met Cus and I started talking to Cus, he made me believe that I was a god.
See, I told you that I wasn't joking when he made him believe he was a god. See, I use Jungian psychology because it's got good terminology. The archetypes, the god-like archetype underneath, they are activating these complexes, parts of this personality, and it's reawakening Mike Tyson to fight again.
He made me believe that, for instance, Cus would say this. Now, to Cus would say, now you hear this? Because Cus had he had this really megalomaniac ego. He said, let me tell you something. All the prophets, all the gods you ever know about, if they had a son, their son couldn't beat my fighter. Know why? Because he's my fighter.
But he also taught you he built that ego, but he also taught you how to be mean. He believed, there's a quotation here in the book where you say, Cus wanted the meanest fighter that God ever created. Someone who scared the life out of people before they even entered the ring. He trained me to be totally ferocious in the ring and out.
Yeah, and that's what I was. That's what I was.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, that's why he taught you how to completely be an animal in the ring. And build you in that way.
No, but an animal, but a sophisticated animal, a smart animal, the lion and the fox. You know what I mean? I could beat the vicious guys, and I got outsmart the slicksters. So I was pretty much didactyl in that apartment, pretty much. But what really was the turning point is that there was nobody that could reach the core like Cus could. No one could inspire me. I don't know.
You mentioned that in some way he was even more than a father to you, a father you didn't have, but he served in some way as the back. I think at some point you say he was my backbone.
He was more than that. He wouldn't let no one say anything negative about me. At any fight, if someone said something negative about me, he was the old man, he would attack them.
Literally.
Yeah, physically. He wouldn't let nobody allow any negativity to even seep through my psychic. Everything was that I'm invincible, I'm a savage, I'm ferocious, and the smartest savage. I don't even think that way anymore.
He also had you read a lot.
Yeah. He always had me read mostly books about war, Claude von Clausewitz. Yeah, this guy, he was a pretty interesting guy. He read Nietzsche. And this is why Cus read all those books. Cus was pretty much of an intellect, but he was an intellectual and philosopher about war. And he thought fighting was a form of war, and he thought fighting was, Cus really thought he was like born 2,000 years too early. He should have been a Roman gladiator or something, because he believed fighting was your opponent's surrender, his total destruction. And he didn't think of it as, even though he said it was savage and ferociously, you had to do it in such a relaxed and calm state, without any emotions. And I'm totally emotional guy all over the place, so that thing just didn't work out. But that's what he was all about. A really scientific way of destroying people. He enjoyed hurting the opponent. He wanted them to never have a chance to believe they can beat you.
See, that just ties it all together. It's amazing. I love that clip by Mike Tyson. It really gets at the underlying understanding of Cus D'Amato as far as this idea of being a philosopher of war. Bringing that mindset to fighting. And I just think that is amazing. I couldn't really articulate it better than Mike did right there. Just the last things is that Cus D'Amato also believed in kind of like, he wasn't too into like astrology, but he really believed in kind of different fighters were, depending on their astrology, whether they would be a good fighter or not, or whether they'd be more so a teacher instead of a fighter. And Mike Tyson, I think, is a Cancer, so that's interesting. And so I'm just impressed by this man's kind of intensity, this ability to really get into a person's mind like Mike and build up his ego, enable him to be and become that kind of fighter that he really was, to believe in his own abilities as a fighter, as a champion, and kind of, like he said, he made him feel like a god. He really wanted to hurt the other opponent. And you can still see that in Mike, where he said in his recent interview, my objective is to disable my opponent. So it's really about, you know, implementing that philosophy of war, you know, wanting, and you can tell that Roy Jones Jr. is a little bit worried. He's like, I don't know if I should have taken this fight, you know, and, you know, no disrespect to Roy. He is fantastically skilled, and we're yet to see how it all pans out. But as far as the psychology behind it, you can see that in Mike, that programming there. And so I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I've got different videos on my channel about psychology if you want to check them out. And there's a link in the description for some Mike Tyson books if you're interested in that as well. So I'll see you in the next video.